Right, staff, pay attention, face the front. The staff of all flavours, of course, you're all welcome here. We don't judge necessarily on how you might identify. Dave's here to tell us how he identifies today. Welcome for your first ride on the crazy train. The rules here, of course, are keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle throughout the ride. Otherwise, yeah, welcome. Tell us about yourself. Tell us the background. Give us the whole thing and I'll shut up. Here you go.
Alrighty. Yeah, I'm DC. Name I go by on YouTube and other social media. My background, my story all started back in 2011, and I was living in Japan, northern Japan, in a state called Miyagi, and yeah, I was working as a strength and conditioning coach. I was working with basketball players and a few track cyclists. At the time, we're getting things. We were starting to sort of build up a business, and everything was going pretty well. And then in March 2011, and one afternoon, we got hit by a 9 magnitude earthquake and tsunami afterwards. And that sort of, obviously that does, puts everything on hold, and trying to recover, trying to find food and water for the next few months, and trying to help out people around us. So through that year, though, I was having trouble with my health that I sort of had to put on the back burner because obviously for circumstances and everything like that. I was having abdominal pains, mostly kidney pains. I didn't really understand why at the time. My diet was basically what I could find at the time. I did see a couple of GPs, because I was getting sick all the time, I was getting flus and colds and that sort of stuff. One did take X-rays, but the common theme was, okay, just here's some medication, away you go, sort of thing. But 9 months later, Christmas came around, 2011, and I decided to take a trip back to Australia and visit the family, and just for no other reason really than just to show them, look, I'm fine, everything's going to be great, and I was only going to be here for 2 weeks and get back into my business and build it back up the next year. But while I was here, I got sick again, so I decided to have a checkup. And you go through blood tests, short diagnosis and all this sort of stuff. He recommends scans. I had ultrasound and an X-ray done, and about a week after that, I was in Brisbane Hospital, and they were telling me that I have some form of blood cancer. So then, the usual barrage of tests start, and some of them quite painful. They took a biopsy. I had a large tumour wrapped around my aorta, about the size of a football. I was very small and lean at the time, so it really didn't have anywhere else to grow except crushing the organs, and which is where I was getting the organ pain, the kidney pain. It had been sitting on both my kidneys. The left one had shrunk down to the size of a pea and it was pretty much dead, and the right one was down to just 12% flow capacity. So they gave me, without treatment, they figured that the kidneys would fail before the cancer would kill me, and I had maybe until March, so which would be another 2 months. This was in January 2012, so they gave me a couple of months worth of whether I'd survive or not. So everything that we just spent trying to rebuild after the earthquake, we pretty much just lost everything. So I'm in Australia. My whole life's in Japan. My wife is in Japan at the time as well. Business, house, everything, car. So that took away everything. And then it was, so obviously it was operations, put stents in, try and get my kidneys up to operation. before I could even start treatment. I was a very high stage 4 follicular lymphoma. That was the official diagnosis. Follicular lymphoma is a type of blood cancer that has no cure for. You can only treat it, and the more you treat it, usually the more often it will come back, and the more aggressive it comes back as well. So the most you can hope for is a certain remission period, and after that, you're just going to require more treatment for the rest of your life. I'm already very high stage 4, so it wasn't. It's kind of like, well, how much worse could it get? So the original treatment was after the kidney operations with the stents and everything was CHOP. CHOP is a particularly heavy dose chemotherapy. You run through like four bags of treatment in one day, and so you do a treatment day, and then you have 21-day recovery period, and usually around 5 to 6 days before the next treatment, you start to feel almost human again. So through the first couple of weeks, I found that I did a lot of fasting because I couldn't actually eat anything. Like your mouth is full of sores and a lot of side effects when there's kind of heavy treatment. Your hair falls out, like complete body hair, and there's nothing left. And you just sort of have to sort of take it one day at a time, I guess, and just get through it, because no one can tell you how you're going to feel, how you can sort of make it feel any better. It's quite painful. You get these white cell injections the next day, and that's when all the bone pain starts. So you get when your bones are trying to reproduce these white cells, and you feel every single bone in your body when you're doing this. It's like the weight of your body will crush your bones, even just lying in bed. So we did that for 8 rounds, and we do scans every couple of months just to check on the size of the tumor, and of course, the blood and all that sort of stuff. But after the 6th treatment, my blood was fairly clear. My liver everything was good, but the tumor itself hadn't shrunk very much. So we went out to 8 rounds, and then we did 18 rounds of targeted radiation on the tumor itself. After that, we scans showed that the tumor had shrunk down to about 28%, smaller than what it was originally. So it was still quite sizable, but they put me in a stable stage 2 of blood cancer. But my blood was clear. So a few weeks after that, I was doing some fasting, and I was taking a supplement to help me boost my stem cells. And they took my stem cell. They did a stem cell collection after that for a couple of weeks later, which was really surprising, actually shocking for the staff. Actually, my doctor, when the test came back from the stem cell collection, they put me at 99.4% viable stem cells. So that was really great. That was really good to hear. I was feeling really positive about that. And they put me on a 2-year program for rituximab, rituximab is like the first line of the R-CHOP. That's what the R is from R-CHOP, is rituximab. There's another type of chemotherapy that, and then we did that every 2 months, and that was pretty easy. That was, it left me sick for about 4 to 5 days, but every 2 months that wasn't too bad. And about 9 months after that started, I was feeling pretty good and looking forward to a long remission. That's what the rituximab was supposed to do. It was supposed to put me into a longer remission period. So I started going back to the gym and joined my wife, and we were, it was feeling pretty good. And like this whole period, we were homeless, so we were actually living with the Leukemia Foundation because we had nowhere to live in Australia when this was all going on. So it was kind of a very stressful period. And, trying to get my wife a visa in to stay in Australia too, that took 7 months as well. And pretty much all the money we had left after we had to get rid of everything in Japan. So actually, you used to make the joke that I should have put her on a floating door and given her a life jacket. They would have let her in straight away. But anyway, we get a year into it and everything's going well. We get to 2014, so about 14-month period, and January again, and the tests come back. And of course, these tests are every 2 months. So between the last test and January 2014, I've gone from stage 2, stable, to very high stage 4 again. So I'm back to square one. 2 years to the month and almost to the day. And that was really demoralizing. Before that, I was thinking, I'm going back to Japan soon. I'm going to get my life back on track. And I'm back to square one. So that, the wife and I, we had to talk about it, and we were thinking, we weren't real too sure about where to go from there, whether to keep treating or not. But my oncologist, he was a good guy, and he talked me into going to a clinical trial. This clinical trial was for a drug called bendamustine. It's not a new drug, but it is. It just hadn't been used in Australia for a while, so they were doing a clinical trial on it. And so I had my own clinical nurse. She was keeping track of me every day. We would, they would detail absolutely everything. So you felt like a real lab rat at this point. Like they take down every detail of how you're feeling, how everything's going, and everything like that. So it's very much a controlled situation, which, apart from the lack of privacy, it was actually a good thing. The first treatment is done over 2 days, and the first treatment, when it went in, it kind of felt okay. It didn't have the after effects like R-CHOP does. When you go through R-CHOP, while it's actually going through your body, I would have uncontrollable spasms. Like I'd be sort of shaking in the bed and that sort of thing. And they sort of calm you down with these warm oven blankets, because your whole body just gets freezing cold. And but the R-CHOP, the bendamustine was much easier to going in. But I drove home after the treatment, and as soon as I walked through the door, I started getting these uncontrollable fevers. I was just going to go lie down and sleep it off. That was my thought process at the time. But my wife decided to call an ambulance. So they rushed me back to the hospital. I was pretty much passed out by that stage because the fever was so high. And they ended up keeping me in for a few days and getting me on these all these different medications to try and bring the fever down. So that happened, the first one, and then each treatment actually after that, I had the same fever problem. But when I got to treatment number 3, my treating arm had filled up from shoulder to wrist with long, thick blood clots. So they had to swap arms, and then the next treatment did the same thing to my other arm. So now I've got On treatment 4, both my arms are full of blood clots really solid blood clots. So they had to put a port into my chest. Now, this is an access port, goes directly into the heart and sits underneath the skin. And you sort of inject the needle for the treatment to just go straight into the heart, and it just sort of gets pumped out that way. Which is a bit of a concern. I just filled up both my arms with these blood clots, and now they don't want to pump it straight into my heart. So I'm thinking, what's it going to do to the heart? So, I mean, at the time facing that, we didn't really have any other options, so we did it anyway. And so we still had the fever problem. And so every treatment, I ended up spending 3 or 4 days in hospital, but it didn't have that, the pain that our chop had. So it was, apart from nearly killing me, it was actually fairly comfortable, compared to the other one. But we got to round 8, and it had stopped working on the 3rd treatment. It hadn't done anything towards the cancer since then. So we had to do a stem cell transplant, and autologous stem cell transplant with my own stem cells from the previous year. That was just like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. It was a particularly heavy dose. It was 7 days of 24 hours of chemotherapy, and on the 8th day, they reintroduce the stem cells to try and so basically they just almost kill you, they destroy your body and your marrow, everything, and then reintroduce your stem cells to try and rebuild you. This left me a lot of side effects. I had massive stomach ulcer. I was cooked from the inside. Like, I was completely cooked. My skin was red, because for weeks, even months afterwards, I was still red because everything inside was cooked. All of my organs, my brain, I couldn't function. About halfway through it, before going in, we have another tube put into the heart, because they pump it straight into the heart. A Hickman line, it's called, or a CV line, and it's 2 rubber tubes, 2 connectors, so that you can keep the treatment going 24 hours at a time. And then afterwards, they keep the fluid going through you. But that got an infection in it. It's supposed to stay in for up to 6 months for treatment, but this time it had an infection in it, which that just almost finished me off. They decided to keep going, of course, but to pull the Hickman line out, and this was crazy. You go under for an operation, have this implanted, but when they pull it out, one nurse braced my shoulder, another nurse just grabbed it and pulled it out, just yanked it out like a tug of war. Yeah, good on you. Then they just put a nice dressing over the top of it and wait for it to stop bleeding. So apart from that, scaring the daylights out of you, like inside everything's just been so cooked that I couldn't eat. After the infection, I started, AFib, my heart rate would fluctuate all the time. And I stopped breathing a number of times, and it got to the point where the nurse would actually start coming in every 20 minutes just to wake me up, like every 20 minutes for 24 hours, to make sure that I was still breathing, because I just kept passing out and I stopped breathing, and I'd wake up on these machines and he's surrounded by doctors panicking, trying to get me to come back. After 5 weeks, they let me go home, and I'd lost about 20 kilos, and I couldn't eat. I could barely move. I had to be wheelchaired out. We were before the transplant, or before the last treatment actually on the bendamustine, we had to move from the Leukemia Foundation into our own place. And all we could afford at the time was this tiny little studio. And it was like literally like from the bed to the kitchen and the bathroom was like 2 steps. And I really couldn't even do that. So they tried to convince me that I needed a wheelchair, but we just didn't have the space for it. So I just had to use a walker and help from my wife. And I was pretty much stuck there for the next couple of years. And I couldn't move very, very far from the bed. And, like I had everything being cooked inside. I was bringing up layers and layers of skin. I was passing more. I had all sorts of problems going on, severe IBS, and I had no concentration skills. My brain was literally cooked, so I couldn't remember. My short-term memory had gone pretty much. Like people would come and visit and they'd talk for hours, and even through the conversation, I'd forget that they were there, or I'd forget what we were talking about. And like 5 minutes after they'd left, I can never remember ever seeing them. Like even now, I still can't remember ever seeing them through that period. So couldn't speak very well. I couldn't think, concentrate, remember things. I couldn't move, basically. Like my wife was doing, she was, because of the radiation was so strong coming out of my body, she had to change my clothes and my sheets every single day and wash them separately to hers. And she did this for almost a year. She couldn't sleep in the same bed. She had to sleep. She slept on the floor on a small mattress we bought for her. She was cooking every meal for me. She was doing everything. I had to go to the bathroom like upwards of 10 times a day because of IBS and passing so much skin and things like that. It was a tough time, but it took, it got to the point where, it's hard to stay positive in a situation like that. You've lost everything. You can't move. All the doctors, all the so-called experts are telling you that it's only going to get worse from here. Like, how much worse can it get? I was basically almost dead. And, if my whole life was, this is all I had to look forward to was more treatment. Why would I want to keep going? Why would you want more of that treatment? It's insane. No one would. So it got to the point where it was literally like it was depressing just waking up, because when I was sleeping, I thought, well, maybe tonight, it'll all be over. But I found that through that period that I was craving meat. That was the first time in my life I'd ever actually craved for meat. I knew I needed to rebuild my body. I was so small. My bone tissue, muscle tissue, everything was so tight and small and dried out. I knew I needed proteins and I needed, the collagen and everything to rebuild. So I would start eating as much meat as I could, or we could afford at the time. But it got to the point where, like, I'd get cravings in the middle of the night, and I'd have to get up and I'd cook a steak. I'd even eat like a kilo of meat in the middle of the night, and I would just devour it, and of course, even from before my treatment started, like we always cooked at home. We never, buy takeaway or anything, stuff like that. But I never really sort of thought about things like seed oils or, fat intake and stuff like that so much. It was always, education was always about, lean meats and low fat diets and that sort of garbage. But And it took me a long process from there to now to really get my head around it. But I figured out along the way that I needed to increase my fats. And although I was, for like, it's been 9.5 years remission now. Let's see, September will be 10 years this year. So, and I've spent all that period on basically a ketogenic diet. Like, I still had veggies and rice along the way, and I would fluctuate that. I always fluctuate, same as, it's different seasons. You want to get leaner and so on. So you sort of cut back on the carbs sort of thing. But it wasn't until last year I found Sean Baker and people like yourself. And I said, well, I mean, at first look, I saw people saying, like, this is the carnivore diet. Yeah, only eat meat and proteins and fats and stuff like that. I thought, what's the gimmick? This is BS, because athletes have been doing this for generations. Basically they cut carbs just to get lean for preparation, competition and that sort of stuff. Like, what are they trying to sell? And so I started looking into it, and I'm thinking, well, okay, this is starting to make sense. And I wish I'd done this, 20 years ago. And started looking into people like yourself, and Wilhelm Stephenson is another one I followed as well recently. But now the difference, I mean, even going from ketogenic to strict carnivore, like increasing my fat intake a long way, has been a huge, huge difference. It's like night and day difference. It's like ketogenic is like 90% there, but that extra 10% is like a different life, and it's been. I think I went through the same sort of struggles that a lot of people do when they go to the carnivore diet, is figuring out that you're under eating, for one, you're not getting enough fat, and you don't realize, and you have to eat quite a lot of fat and quite a lot of meat, so there was a bit of a struggle in that term. But even with that, and of course, like, the first couple of months, you can't trust the gas, because until you get your fat sorted out. But even in the first 3 months of even going through that transition period, my blood markers all went from like 20 points below an average healthy range. They jumped, right across the board, between 8 and 10 points. And I thought that was astounding. Like, I was still eating very healthy on a ketogenic diet, and like rarely we would eat, things like cookies, like store-bought cookies and things like that. My wife would make cakes and breads and cookies at home. But since when I started this, I stopped taking supplements as well, because I was either going to prove it or disprove it to myself. I didn't really care if anyone else knew about it. I just wanted to either way, for my own peace of mind, is this going to work? And I was still having trouble with colds and flus. Like, a cold would last me months because it would just keep rebounding, and my immune system just wasn't strong enough to fight it off. So, throughout the whole period, and of course, that 9 years, I'm thinking, okay, I'm trying all these different spices, herbs, and all these other sort of garbage. Everyone keeps telling you, okay, this spice will boost your immune system, and this fruit will boost your immune system. So you try everything, and but when I went to carnivore, like I said, the first 3 months, all my blood markers jumped 8 to 10 points right across the board. About 6 weeks into it, I started getting a cold, and I dramatically increased my fat intake. like I was just like for snacks I would have just eat beef fat. I'd do it in the air fryer and just cook it up, and it would just eat it like chips, And it lasted 2 days. So I've gone from having a cold for a 3-month period, being bedridden, to 2-day cold and not stopping anything. Like I continued moving. I still went to the gym. I still, did my activities for the day. That was incredible. Another 3 months into that, of course, I had more blood tests because I have blood tests every 3 months still. I see my oncologist every 6 months still. And my bloods are in a normal, healthy range. From at the start of this, I was about 20 points on average down. Now it's still low in a normal, healthy range according to their test, but it's inside that normal, healthy range. But more importantly to me than the blood markers is my immune system. Like I haven't had a cold since, and that's such a dramatic turn for me. We did a trip to Japan about 6 months ago. Now, normally, like beforehand, I would drive out, 4-hour drive out to my parents' place in the countryside, and I'd get sick. I did a trip 6 months ago. I did a trip to Japan for 2 weeks with my wife to see her family. It's the first time in years, obviously, because of all the garbage that's been going around the world. And I refuse to take any of those stupid poisons. So, I didn't get sick at all. We did. It's quite a long trip. We go to Tokyo, then we go from Tokyo to Sendai, which is another overnight trip on the bus. Actually, we took Shinkansen this time, so it was only a couple of hours, but still, it was a long trip. Normally, I would be sick. And, that 2 weeks was nonstop. Like from the day we got there, we were walking, upwards of 20 to 30,000 steps a day. We were out sightseeing. We're doing all kinds of things, We got home. Everything's good. So it's definitely, to me, now, it's now March. It's 12 months exactly that I've been on carnivore strict, like 100% strict, like just meat, eggs, water. That's it. And it's definitely proven to me that it is our natural human diet. It has dramatically changed my outlook. I was feeling pretty positive before I started because I was, been in remission for some time, like almost 9 years at that time, about 8.5 years. So I was feeling pretty good about myself, thinking, yeah, I've got this nailed. But then when I went carnivore, it's like, wow. And, I have successfully repaired my lymphatic system, my immune system, my hormone production. I love going to the gym. I love training. I love getting outside. It's not, I can't say it's 100% just due to diet, okay, because you need movement, all right, and other things. So I do deep breathing exercises. I do grounding. I do, and I love getting to the gym and just exercise. Guys just love to lift heavy weights, So, there has been at different periods, I have done a little bit of fasting here and there. Well, through treatment, I did some fasting, basically because I didn't have really any choice. I couldn't eat. I don't do a lot of fasting now. I eat between 2 and 3 meals a day. So the only fasting will be in between. And but that changes. I change my routine every now and then. Either I might train in the morning. Sometimes I'll train fasted, or I'll train in the afternoons, and I'll eat before I train. And it's working. It's feeling pretty good. So I think it's definitely become a manageable disease on a carnivore diet. They still won't say that like they'll admit I'm in full remission, but they won't say I'm cured because I'm sure if I change my diet back to like a lean fat or like a lean meat sort of diet or the standard guidelines, I'm sure it would probably come back because you get what's called rabbit starvation, and I think that was my biggest problem. It wasn't that every now and then. Yeah, you're human. Everyone goes on binges, like you might have a weekend of junk food sort of thing and go drinking with your mates and that sort of stuff. But I don't think that was the biggest cause. I was pretty rare on that sort of thing. I was for too long on a lean sort of diet. It was, and I think that was the biggest problem I had was rabbit starvation. Since my fat intake is now around 70% of my nutrients, everything is good. I'm just cruising along, and it just seems to keep on improving. Again, I think one of the biggest changes for me too is the ability to think again, the ability to concentrate and to focus. When the last 10 years, when you go through that, not being able to think and knowing that you can't, it is extremely frustrating, because you sit down and you try to focus on something, anything, try to do a bit of writing. And, 5 minutes later, you're thinking, what am I doing here? You get distracted so easily. So it was, these are some of the biggest changes for me. And it just continues to get better, and the more I listen to people like yourself and like Chafee and Baker and the rest of them, the more I learn. It's just been fantastic. It's been a steep learning curve, but it is. I mean, the great thing is that you can get this information for free. Like people like yourself putting these videos out and educating people. Yeah, it's incredible. So, which is also kind of frustrating because like ignorance is really no excuse these days, because the information's out there, and it doesn't take that much to sort of delve into and find it either. But I do understand why some people have a hard time believing it, because it took me a little bit to get my head around that fact as well. It's not just, everyone thinks, okay, yeah, politics is all corrupt and it's all evil and they lie to you about everything, but you don't realize it's not just the politics. Like it's absolutely everything, your food, your education, and that sort of takes a bit to get your head around. I understand that, but the difference, I think it's been amazing, actually. And
well, incredible story. The capacity that you clearly have as a survivor is quite stunning. So we take our hats off to you. Long may it continue as well. In the meantime, tell us all about your various social media involvement as it is now, what the plans are, where you're doing things, and how people can find you so that they can all go and sub to get the benefit of your experiences over there.
Okay. Well, you can get me on YouTube, DC Learning to Live, also Twitter, Facebook, also on Rumble, Brighteon, and Odyssey. Basically, all I'm trying to do now is to just show people stories that are pretty much healing stories, like the carnivore diet, or just the proper human diet, whatever you want to call it. it can do wonders for you, and it is very effective, not just short term but long term. And I just want people to understand and see the truth. See the fact is that everything that you've been eating or educated on in the past is complete BS. But there is hope. There is, and I know it's difficult to see hope when you are sick, when you're in pain, especially for the long term. It makes it very difficult. But doesn't matter where you are now, what your situation is, you can improve it. I'm not saying you can cure it, but you can improve it. You can make it better. And I know it's very daunting. So I always tell people, like, I know even if you have a large goal in mind, don't focus on the mountain. Focus on the next step and just take it one step at a time, and you will get to the top. And I know this firsthand because when I was stuck in bed, I was stuck in bed for years, and it took me a long time to learn how to move again, learn how to walk, I even had to learn how to breathe again. I couldn't breathe. So just do what you can, and then what you can do will improve and get better as you go, each step of the way. So no matter where you are, at least give it a try. And I know it's possible for sure.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing. Incredible story, as I said. Everybody, get across to all of the social media outlets there. Make yourself known over there. And join me next time when someone will probably be wrong on the interwebs, because it doesn't look like slowing down anytime soon.
No,
See you then.